Well, welcome to the initial episode of the Bravery Blueprint. I'm here with my co-host, Brian Ellis. My name is Travis Yates, and we're excited to introduce to you what we believe is going to be a game changer in the law enforcement and first responder community when it comes to leadership. And we're just going to kind of spend this first episode explaining what this is, explaining who we are, and we hope to give you some really great episodes in the future. Brian Ellis, how are you doing?
I'm just trying to live that dream, brother. How are you?
Well, man, before we get into who you are, who I am, I mean, we just kind of locked heads together at a National Sheriff's Conference, and here a few weeks later, here we are, huh?
Hey, there's no rest for, just energetic people. We just get after it. So.
Yeah, Brian, I think what I was so attracted to for you is, I've been on the road for about a decade talking about this leadership stuff that's kind of a different twist, not just theoretical, but just real practical stuff, how you can really have the courage to make the tough decisions. And we've seen obviously such a failure of that in recent years. And you yourself, and you're part of a group that's doing literally the same thing. It's a different twist. And so I think we immediately recognize that we're going to be much better together than far apart. And so what's your take on that when we first met?
Well, it's funny. I mean, when I came home, I talked to some family members about, just the fact that, have you ever met somebody and right off the bat, you felt like you'd known them for a really long time? And I mean, that was the case. And of course, we shared some stories that were right. They were just so aligned with one another. We just kind of just chuckled after chuckled, and the reality of it is guys like you and me, we got into a career because we loved to serve, and during that service, man, we got kicked a lot, and and I don't claim to know everything. I've broken a lot of things over the course of my time, but I care, and I love people, and I love this profession. And until my last breath, I'm going to help anybody that I can and serve.
Yeah, well, I was super excited because I know me personally. I've been kind of this lone wolf out here. I do a podcast and I write these articles, but I often sometimes feel alone. I think you probably have a similar feeling in the past. So when I met you, I said, "Oh man, there's more of us out here." And so when we started having a conversation afterwards about doing a dual podcast, it was actually something I wanted to do for a long time, to have kind of a co-host role with two people, because it's always going to be better than one. And so in very rapid fashion, here we are, the Bravery Blueprint. You can check us out at thebraveryblueprint.com. And I just want people to hear about you, Brian, because, man, it's really super cool. And before we get going, you'll see it in the bio there on the website. But I mean, Brian is a co-author of just an incredible book, right? And of course, that's not the beginning. This is sort of recent. Start us from the beginning, man, how you ended up here.
That's quite a thing to unpack, but in a nutshell, I did 25 years in law enforcement. I kind of started down the road where I'm at today. I'm the chief experience officer for Magnus Works, which is a product of the National Command and Staff College. And for those who don't know what Command College is, the National Command and Staff College, we're an academic institution for serving public safety. We've been around for 14 years, and again, just loving on public safety, trying to help them be better. A lot of times when we talk in the leadership space, we tend to talk about theories and kind of what does leadership look like, but I don't think there's a lot of people out there telling you how to do it, and especially through just stories and understanding the way our brains and our hearts and everything else, kind of connects into all that. And then all the pitfalls that happen as people kind of go after that shiny ring of power, and all the BS that comes with just the people problems in that space. So, I got introduced to Mitch and Company about 10 years ago, and I started working on the side, and I just kind of loved what I did. When I had the opportunity to jump and do this thing full time, I ran.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously what you and you're doing there at the Command College, Brian, it's not just leadership training. because that's always been a big burden in my heart is you go and you train these individuals, and we've both been doing this for many years on the road, and then you just leave, right? And you don't know whether they have any other questions, but you really had an integral role in, which is, I think, this cutting edge stuff is staying involved with those students. Kind of talk to us briefly how you've done that. And I'm sure this is going to come up in future episodes because you have an incredible amount of data to pull from.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's just how we learn. I mean, how people are just wired, and that's the reality of it is if you go to a class and 4 weeks from after that class, you're going to forget 90% of what you went and saw at that class, and that doesn't make you dumb. It just makes you human. I mean, there's a curve of forgetting, and it just happens because our brains are always tuning and pruning and looking for information, and so it just becomes hard. I mean, we know what helps us get really good at anything is just repetition. Any skill, whether it's being on the firing range or learning how to squat. If you just got to do it a lot to get really good at it. And then I'll take a squat as for an example. If over time in doing a lot of squats, you learn the importance of where to put the bar on your shoulders, your forward tilt, how you brace, all the breathing, the tracking of your knees, the stability in your feet. You kind of get all these different little cues. It's a lot more than just lifting progressively heavier weight. So, and the same thing with on the range. If you start thinking about trigger pull and breathing and sight picture, all these things come into play when you repetitively do things. And that's the biggest problem in leadership is if you really think about how many leadership opportunities are available to public safety, for example, there's not very many, number one. I remember when I got promoted to lieutenant, I was an exempt manager in my organization. And I walked into my boss's office and I said, "Hey, boss, do you want to have an expectations meeting or anything?" Because I just got the keys of the city. I was excited, but I didn't want to screw anything up. And he said, "Well, I expect you'll do a good job. Go on." And that was it. That was about what I got. And you really have to go out and find your own leadership opportunities in organizations that struggle with time, people, and money. It becomes challenging. And so how do you build repetition in whatever it is that you're learning? And I'm not saying you have to use our product, but man, you got to find a way to get your reps in.
Well, I don't know of any other product like yours. I think they almost have to use your product, but we'll say, we're not going to be pitching everything today, but people are going to have to hear about it because the data you're bringing in is simply incredible. And, I'm hopeful because, similar experience, Brian. I mean, people don't understand this. Unlike the military, when they start talking about leadership, literally day one in the basic academy to everybody, in law enforcement, it's almost like it's behind the curtain thing. And, maybe you make sergeant or lieutenant, and maybe you go to a little management school, or maybe you make captain or major or deputy chief. And, we'll send you to the special school, whether it's the National Academy, FBI National Academy, or lead, whatever. I mean, it's almost just rite of passage, but there's really no focus in on, man, what do we really need here? And so thank goodness we have what you're doing in the command college. And that's really what kind of led me down that path. I had actually been through all that. I'd been to 2 or 3 management schools. I've been to the National Academy. I've got a doctorate degree in it, for goodness sakes. I was doing everything I could to try to learn from it. But what I was seeing is all this head knowledge of everybody around me, but nobody practicing it, right? And of course, that came full circle 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when we really saw the downgrade of law enforcement. And I'm unlike everybody else. I don't point the fingers at the media or the activists or the politicians. I'm pointing the fingers at us because I'm like, we let that happen, right? Our leaders did not have the courage to stand up. It's easy to lead in times of peace, right, Brian? It's easy. And that's really where I think law enforcement went was, I started in law enforcement in 1993. And man, for the next 10 or 20 years, I mean, there wasn't really any sort of, we went through the Rodney King thing right before that. but there wasn't really any seminal moments that tested anybody. You had, and we just kind of rocked along, and we threw bad guys in jail, and people knew their mission, and people communicated, and the public was pro-police. And then all of a sudden, several years ago, that all almost turned overnight. And I saw one by one, all these people that I thought were leaders were just caving to the silliest stuff. Reforms after reforms after reforms, and no evidence. Listen, I think we both do this because we want to see reform. We want to see change. We want to see what's best for the community and law enforcement. That's not what we've been seeing. The things we've been doing has been actually hurting the profession and hurting communities. That's clear today more than ever. And so it got me to thinking, like, what's going on with this leadership stuff? Like, here I am, I'm in an upper top rank at my agency. And I'm looking around me and seeing everybody that seems scared to death, which obviously is weird, right? Like, we work with men and women, Brian, that will run through a dark alley with men with guns and they don't hesitate. That's physical courage, right? But the moral courage of making the right decision when you may have something to lose, when you may lose status, So when you see these officers being thrown under the bus and you see all these sort of misrepresentations and lies by so-called leaders, that's what it was driving me crazy, because these people aren't dumb. They're not stupid. They've been to all the management leadership training I've been to. And so it got me thinking about this thing called courageous leadership. Like, if you don't, you can have all the leadership head knowledge you want, but if you don't have the courage to display it when it matters, what good is it? So Brian, you co-authored this book, and I want you to explain to people what it means and kind of where the book came from. Everyone needs to go get this. It's really incredible. Just came out, actually.
Yeah, well, I want to take a back step, because what you said is, I think, really powerful, and it's important to kind of unpack it a little bit, because I think that there are some things that we can kind of point to and some aha moments of how it happened. Because let's face it, I mean, yeah, everybody needs more leadership skill time and be, knowing what skills and behaviors. And I'm no different. I need them as well. I need to get my reps in. But, courage and integrity is a big area that just seems like it's a big hole that needs to be filled. And I think, at least if you looked back in the day, I had a friend of mine just recently who's a retired LAPD cop, who said, back in the day, LAPD officers always had the LA Times that if bad things happened in their organization, somebody would go tell, and then there would be this, you get thrown out on Front Street, because accountability does matter. And if you look at the stats, I mean, it's not any new information. Dr. Richard Ayers was reporting of the sources of police stress. The biggest stress in police organizations is the stress that managers have on their organizations. It's the biggest one by far, because I think what cops ultimately realize, especially if you've worked a beat for any period of time, you can put me in any single socioeconomically deprived neighborhood in America, and I will tell you, you'll have more fans than not, but they're not going to outwardly cheer for you. They're not. They have to live there 24/7, and you can't protect them 24/7. No agency can. But they're silently supporting you. And there's just not very many people that are anti-law and order, because at the end of the day, it's a psychologically, it's safety is our basic premise of human need. Maslow has had this thing figured out a long time ago, and for whatever reason, we just haven't stood up the hard fight in making sure that we provide that service with a caring heart. And we're not always going to be perfect. You can't be perfect in an organization, in a profession that you have to make split-second decisions, and sometimes without having good information. People are going to fall, and then there's human behavior where some people are just going to do really dumb crap that we're going to have to deal with, and that's got to be okay. We have to go. We should make every attempt that we possibly can to make sure those things don't happen through good hiring practices, through training. But we don't. We hide behind this false pretense of accountability. And I'll give you one real quick, because I know I'm just rambling, but when I first got onto the job, if you got called in the captain's office, I mean, you knew your butt was going to get chewed. But you know what? Whatever it is that got you into the captain's office, you would never do it again, because that butt chewing worked. And now you have a lot of administrators that just, I mean, that goes over to the little building, over into internal affairs, and next thing you know, that officer's stressed out on an internal affairs investigation, when in fact that most of those things could be taken care of with just a good old hard, Beverly Hills cop Inspector Todd chewing. And we've just gotten away from it, and it's unfortunate. Essentially, the book Magnus Ovea is really just trying to how to take people from beyond. Let's not stop at good. Let's what is beyond good. We want to achieve greatness. We have to look at all the things that contribute to that, and from an individual and an organizational context. And so we have this theory that uses 11 rings of well-being, and that's everything from leadership to resiliency to mental toughness to your financial health to your spiritual connectivity, the social connections you have, the relationships that you make, and really just trying to help you get reps in all those areas all the time, just so you can thrive.
Well, yeah, man, I think it's incredible. I said that, and that kind of comes in place to why we decided to do this podcast together. I wrote a book in just so people can see, it's called The Courageous Police Leader. I wrote that. Didn't think I'd ever write a book, but I was doing this training called The Courageous Police Leader, and things would just keep getting worse, right? You got to think about it, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's no hope. No one's listening. And so I decided to write a book to maybe get it in front of more people. And the book came out July 4th, 2019. And of course, 2020 happens afterwards. So I'm not sure it worked, but that's kind of the different twist. And I think it's similar, when I hear about greatness and when I hear about courage combined, and that in my mind, Brian, that is what we're trying to do here with this podcast. I mean, what two better virtues does a leader really need, right? Let's try to be great. Let's try to be courageous when time comes. And so that's what I think we're going to try to glean out of these podcasts as we talk to each other about current issues, past issues, as we bring on some guests and talk about it. What about you? What's your thoughts? What would you hope to gain out of this?
Yeah, I mean, again, for me, education has no finish line, right? I'm far from perfect, but I can tell you this is I love diversity of thought and the ability to get people together and just talk. I mean, even if it's on the opposite ends of the spectrum, I mean, at the end of the day, I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day about values and beliefs, and I think we get so caught up and wound up in our beliefs that we forget the value of conversation, and the value that we all have aligned. Most of our values are very much aligned. Right. Our beliefs don't even have to be true for us to believe them. But yet, if we were to take anybody and sit them down with a little values test, 9 times out of 10, our values are pretty much aligned, and we've forgotten the ability to have those communications with one another. And we're in this age of rage, right? Like, I'm here and you're there, and and yet, it just, to be at this stage in civilization and we're that wonky baffles my mind. So yeah, we're gonna hit the reset switch and kind of get back onto some level ground and talk some things out and press forward, man, because there's a lot of people out there that are burnt out. There's a lot of people out there that are not working very hard. and it's not because they're not good people. They just can't see up right now. They can't see north because there's so much stuff piling up in front of them, and they just don't see any other way out.
Yeah, I think there's no better time than right now for the Bravery Blueprint podcast. I think people are thirsty for it. People need it. They're looking for a sense of direction. And man, I'm very, very pleased to be doing this with you, Brian. I'm looking forward to the weeks to follow, man.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't get a chance to kind of, I know we talked a lot about me, but you know, it's funny when I first started, when you gave me a copy of your book, and I started trying to read a little bit of it on the plane, and I went, oh, I can't do this. This is not, because the minute I start sinking in this, I'm not going to want to put it down. And then as I did read it, I was just sitting there and just going, well, that was so and so, or this incident. You could name names, and or I mean, there was just so many good parallels, and it so like I got to ask. I mean, what was the biggest inspiration for you to go? Okay, yeah, it's the right time. I need to put pen to paper. You know, what really compelled you to go? I'm knocking this thing out right now. We're going.
Well, obviously, it's not a book you could have written with 10 or 20 years on a police department, right? It almost took me going through a lot of things through, you know, almost 30 years of experiences to sort of look around and say, man, needs to be discussed. I never envisioned writing a book about it, but I really wrote the book out of fear. I was really fearful where the profession was headed. I was fearful where the lack of leadership was taking us. And nobody wants to live in that world, right, Brian? Nobody wants to live in a world where the police are scared to do their job, the communities have higher crime, the police aren't respected, authorities not respected. I know we all may be listening to this going, we're kind of there. Well, yeah, but it could be a lot worse. There's a lot more things that could happen. And I looked around. I honestly didn't want to do. I mean, I thought, well, surely somebody's talking about this. Somebody's out there talking about this. I think you guys are doing it closer than anybody. But I didn't really see anyone talking about it. And I kind of laugh when I'll see, you know, everybody out there listening that, you know, the leadership gurus or the training gurus, and they're all talking this and that. But man, when the rubber hits the road and when they really need to talk, I was not seeing many people talking about it. You know, Ferguson was a lie. Baltimore was a lie. So many lies. The book talks about a lot of, I don't have time to go through them all. And I did see our leaders going, hey, this is a lie. In fact, I saw them going along with the lie. And I just thought, man, if this continues, this is going to destroy public safety. Well, yeah, that was 5-6 years ago. Look where we are today. And so I decided I needed to do it. In fact, my editor tried to talk me out of publishing it because I was still on the job when I published it. He said, man, people aren't going to like this. And I go, I can't help that, right? That's part of our problem. We're too worried about what people think. As long as we're telling the truth and we're being transparent, I'm not sure why we're worried about it. But, you know, cancel culture was sort of big and bad back then. Nobody cares about that now, right? But back then, everyone was kind of worried about cancel culture. But I just thought, how hypocritical of me if I've teach this class called Courageous Police Leader, and I'm scared to publish a little book. I mean, that seems a little bit hypocritical. So, yeah, I wanted to almost be a disruptor in the leadership space, and basically tell people, because people wonder, Brian, like everybody working for a chief or a sheriff, maybe you're in a bad environment working for them. They've all been to the training. They've all been to the leadership classes. They've all done it. They all have long resumes, and they're wondering, why is this going so wrong? And I wanted to maybe give an answer to some folks on why that is. So that's why I did it.
Yeah, no, I commend you for doing it. I mean, did you have a journal throughout your career? Did you keep like notes or something? Because it just seems like there's such rich value in some of that stuff. And I mean, for myself, if there was one regret that I had, it was I didn't do a good enough job journaling some things that could really help people downstream.
Yeah, I got that advice about 2 years ago, so about 29 years too late. I never journaled. I've got some old notebooks of like my call logs and stuff, but I never journaled. And if anybody is still on the job, man, I highly recommend it because I never did that. But no, that just poured out of my heart. That was in my mind. And I've got this, if something, I've got to get it written down. So I've written articles throughout my career. Probably some of those sections were probably an offshoot or expansion of some of those articles. But no, nothing like that. It just happened. It happened relatively quickly when I started writing it. The editing process and everything was a lot longer, as you know, than actually writing it. But yeah, I mean, I tell you, but for me to find you and what the command college is doing and trying to go from good to great, being not just settling for good, in fact, not just settling for mediocre, but being great, because people need to understand that the men and women that are working the streets right now are some of the greatest human beings on the planet. We're just in a kind of a government bureaucracy that sort of status quo is king, right? Why do we do these things this way? Because we've always done them this way. And I'm like you, I can see the greatness there. I see it. It's just a matter of lighting the flame. And so I'm looking forward down the road with this podcast of encouraging people to do that because I just really see that. I'll just tell you right now, I love the Bravery Blueprint. I love what we're trying to do. I can see seminars. I can see trainings. I can see books. I can see it all of putting courage and greatness together because I think that synergy is incredible.
100%. And the reality of it is, the vast majority of cops in this nation, I mean, the vast 99.9% of them want what the community wants. I mean, I grew up on the Andy Griffith Show. It may sound very corny, but man, Sheriff Griffith was the kind of cop that I wanted to be, a guy that took the spirit of the law and problem solved and brought people together. Of course, bad guys, come with the territory, and you got to chase bad guys because you're the only person that can chase bad guys. But I was never trying to do any ill will to anybody. If anything, I had more conversations on the way to jail with people trying to help them stop being criminals, to get their lives back on track. And a lot of times, look, our past professions are the worst at promoting themselves because they're not outwardly promoters. I mean, they're the men and women that are buying the kid in a street who doesn't need any food. They buy him a burger, or they do something for somebody out of the kindness of their heart. You only get to see them on the viral video that captures us at our worst moments. And some of those are, and even some of those videos are they don't represent the whole story. Some of them do. It's unfortunate. We all fall. We're all human beings. But man, we're all out trying to do what this noble profession provides us the opportunity to do, and that's to protect and serve. And so I'm just like you. I'm very excited about having the opportunity to give people opportunities to thrive, not only professionally but personally, and that goes beyond our brothers and sisters in blue. I mean, anybody that wants to ring that bell, I will gladly help. And that's my mission from this day forward.
Right. Exciting stuff, man. The Bravery Blueprint. Check us out at thebraveryblueprint.com. Before we get off here, Brian, anything else? Any parting words?
No, I'm just I'm jacked to see what's next. I thank you. I think that us meeting each other was no coincidence. That we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I'm an optimist too. I know change is slow, so there's a lot of shoveling that needs to happen, and we're going to get to work.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for all you joining us. Thanks for joining Brian and I at the Bravery Blueprint. And just remember to stay courageous and strive for greatness. Thank you.
See you guys.